can still jump in, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
they show up late. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
And this will be recorded, Ron.
Oh,
Take a guy like you.
Yes, yes, anything you say will be held to posterity. And it may be used for you or against.
short intro. Yeah,
Yes.
Ron and I both live in Visalia. I met Ron 10, 12 years ago when he started in a local informal group of photographers that's gone consistently since then. We meet at a Marie Callender's with usually once a month. So food, good pie, and really good photo tips and share. He's worked with the local Visalia Times Delta paper since '89, I believe. So he's seen the transition from film and probably guided most of the staff from film to digital to, I suspect now some of the younger reporters are doing it with iPhones. Because I noticed a lot of the photo credits in the paper, some of the reporters are doing their own photography since the photo staff is down a bit. Ron is one that just loves to gently remind the rest of us in town that are photographers what a great job he has. He will post an image on Facebook with a little 3-letter phrase. It's always the same phrase. And the image might be of a family enjoying a fresh snowfall in the Sierras or the county fair, presidential visit to Fresno, whole variety of really interesting places. And his little phrase is always the same: my office today. I know others like me feel just a little bit jealous of all the places he can get into that we can't. So we're going to hear some stories behind the stories he gets assigned to take pictures of. And so it's all yours, Ron. Let you and Elizabeth set it up.
thank you, John. It's not often I get introduced at all. That was pretty good. Thank you.
All right. You
Let's
can
have
have
us
it
our
your
mics
way,
up.
Ron.
Okay, we'll see how this goes. You have to help me out a little bit. Can you see? Because what I see now is a website on my browser. So if I put this away, all right. So there's going to be some stuff up on the screen occasionally. It's not necessarily related to what I'm talking about, but you know, you got to have visual stuff, right? So John's right. I have some of us say the best job on the planet. It depends on the day of the week. So I have to start out by saying that what I'm saying tonight, are my opinions and not necessarily those of my employer. The images, by and large, are copyrighted by them and not by me, but they're pretty gracious to let me use this stuff for things of this nature. Not that any of you are going to want off and run any of my pictures anywhere else, but I have to say these things. I look kind of like this when I'm on vacation. The one on the left, not the other one. Just this is at Legoland. I throw this in there just because I'm going to talk about gear a little bit and myself, I guess, before I go too far. My family's really good. They have learned to understand and tolerate my pursuit of a better picture, even when I'm on vacation. So unlike the last one on the tour bus and the last one back to the meeting point and all those things, tour guides usually get used to me, I guess. But this is me at work. Not every day. There are some of us who do this every day, and I have a lot of respect for the photographers, the journalists that travel this way every time this plane leaves the ground. This is their life. It's very, very hectic. I'm really happy to be a local photographer. I'm not quite this old, but I have been in Visalia since '89. We transitioned to digital in 2001, towards the end of 2001, and that was kind of my baby. I got to spend about $85,000 of the company's money in that year to buy equipment for 4 photographers. Each of us got 2 digital bodies, So some of my stuff got a little jumbled, so you have to bear with me. But so I'll go back to my friends. They put up with me. They pose for me when I find a good spot. And I'm still a newsman at home, so you know, a fight breaks out in the hallway. This is kind of how we respond. Those are my two boys. They've put up with me a lot for taking pictures here and there. I get a new, you know, lens or new camera, and they're usually the first ones I try it out on. This is a day that I picked them up from school and was taking them home when a fire, I think it was a house fire, came over the scanner, and I was like, sorry guys, you have to go with me on this. It turned out, fortunately, not to be very serious at all, really, but I think they were a little disappointed that they were going to get home in time to do their homework. So when it comes back, I get to show off a little bit for them. So these are their yearbook school pages. So I have a lot of fun, put some stuff together. So they've put up with me for all these years. So I get to put some of their pictures into a yearbook page and impress their friends a little bit, maybe. I don't know, or they think I'm a geek. It's up to them. Gear is gear. We talk a lot about gear. I'm sure you guys, maybe some of you have seen this cartoon before. I really love it. We get a lot of questions when we're standing around with a lot of gear hanging around us from either, a football game or something. And people do a lot better when they just learn how to use the stuff they have than just buying the latest greatest thing. That's my tip for gear this evening, I hope. So basically my job is to get the camera in the right place at the right time. And sometimes it involves places like this. Those of you, I don't know, John probably remembers this, when they built our 8th floor hotel in Visalia, I went there during its construction site and hung from the inside of the crane at about this height. It's an interesting thing to do from time to time. I'm glad to be done with it. I actually have done this rappel down the side of that hotel twice now. It's a fundraising thing. It's kind of fun if you're not afraid of heights. I'm not. But it is kind of a long way down. But it's essentially my job to put cameras and lights and all that stuff where it needs to be. And then, push the button is helpful. But a lot of what we do is, some people call us glorified, pack mules. I bring a lot of equipment around here and there. I know most of you guys probably know your way around a camera as well, or better than I do, maybe. So tonight, my hope is to show you a behind the scenes narrative a little bit, I guess, as I go through some of these pictures. I'm happy to answer technical questions, but I'm kind of trying to get away from that this evening and just talk about the things I have to do, the things I can't do, and circumstances that surround the news environment, if you will. Now my computer froze. Nice. Okay. Really? Interesting. Okay, we'll move on to sports here. Can you guys see pictures okay, by the way? Everybody good? Okay, super. So this is me at a UCLA game. We get bibs and press passes and all kinds of nonsense to make sure that you're official on the sideline. I have to admit, if I go to a football game and I'm not on the sideline or any other sporting event, I have a really hard time paying attention. I'm so accustomed to this point of view. It really feels way far away when I'm in the stands with my family or friends or whatever. It's a very strange thing to realize when I'm up there. It's like, yeah, I'm not working. This is weird. The thing I want to add here too is I really like, again, the local aspect that I have of my job. There are a lot of guys and gals that do sports only, and a lot of them do it at a level that is this or higher into the professional area. I've been to 2 Rose Bowls and a Super Bowl, and they are wall to wall, elbow to elbow, knee to knee photographers all the way around the zones that you can be in, and that's not great, honestly. It's kind of hectic. It's gotten more that way. So when I'm at home at a prep football game, high school football game, I pretty much have the run of the field. I can go anywhere I want. When I was at the Super Bowl, there were, I think it was 5 different photo ID or photo zones. They basically quadrant the field into 4 zones, and you get a pass that allows you to be in one of those 4 areas. You can't move around. You can kind of move from one spot to the other if you can find another spot to go to. Places like USA Today, ESPN, and some other the really high-end sports coverage folks get a golden pass that allows them to go all the way around. I, for the Super Bowl, got stuck up in a seat that was like over one of the tunnels at the Pasadena. Still a great opportunity. I don't regret it. I just like what I'm doing at home better. As an example, this is not in Visalia. This is actually in Clovis before I came to Visalia. Anybody want to guess who that is with the basketball? John, you might already know, no Farah. I'll give you a couple minutes to think. So this is at a basketball camp for kids. I think there might have been one other media person there besides myself. This is Michael Jordan. It's one of my favorite pictures. There's this great interaction between him and these 2 brothers. And it was early, very early in his career. I wouldn't say nobody cared he was there, but he was definitely not the mainstream sensation that he became. And it was a really cool moment. I have to be honest, at the time, I really didn't know who he was, but I was shooting for moments, and that's kind of what I do. We look for moments between people. The interaction there that was golden to me. It could have been anybody. It could still be another guy, and it would be a great picture. I'll go back for just a second here. This event was followed up in the years past. You may have seen it on TV. It became huge. They moved it from the gym. He played in exhibition games, and with his friends, and some of the guy who puts this on is a good friend, Rod Higgins. And they had friends that they would play exhibition games. I think it cost Michael some money to play one year. The NBA was not happy with it. He did it anyway and paid the fine. But the following year, he came back, and I had this printed, or I printed it actually, and I'm going to confess this in public because my wife already knows this, and she's very upset with me for it. But I had this autographed, and I gave it away. So stuff happens. But the next year, he was not the same guy. In just a year's time, I could see the difference in him. And if you've watched the special, the documentary lately, there's a lot of pressure that comes with his status. So it was kind of interesting to see the difference and change. It wasn't great to see, but it was interesting. So one of the rules that we have here is we shoot tight and crop tighter. This is full frame. Sometimes in sports, things just kind of happen. Not the best picture, but it's interesting. Things happen. And part of this is just being ready all the time with the camera. I get access to the sidelines. I get access to the dugouts most of the time. But I'm always looking for the interaction between athletes, the reactions, the peak moments, that kind of thing. So when somebody is having a great moment, that's when I want to be able to take the picture. So I have to kind of watch the whole thing through my lens. It's difficult to be a real spectator. So with COVID, we all kind of thought this is how we were going to end up shooting sports for the rest of the year. I have a track meet tomorrow to shoot, and it's the first sporting event I have shot in about a year, and it's strange. I shot a practice just the other day, and I really felt rusty. Didn't expect that, but we're getting back into sports. This was shot about a year ago. It was the last baseball game I shot. I think it was the last sporting event that I shot. And again, I'm shooting from areas that allow us to find a better angle on stuff like this. Is at third base. You can't see this angle from the stands. And probably I wouldn't be able to get this exact angle in a pro game. It would either be lower in a different dugout or from further back. So I really enjoy being able to shoot, to put the camera where I can make a better picture at the local sport level. I'm gonna run through some of these here. So again, I'm looking for faces, interaction. This was a really big event that was actually played at Recreation Park. So these are still high school kids, but they had it was I think a playoff game. I forget honestly, but the place was packed, and I really wanted to show that. So I talked my way into the dugout, and the way the field is, I got this nice curve that comes up over his shins. So I'm shooting really low, and I just happened to get a nice play, and it all worked out. It's kind of hard to plan some of this stuff, but you just have to be ready for it. And we shoot a zillion frames trying to get the right pictures. Again, I can't plan this. I just have to kind of anticipate. If I see batters flinch, I'm going to fire frames. This is the luxury that we have with the digital world that I didn't really have with film, because 36 frames in a roll of film and you're done. And if I come back with 10 rolls of film shot, I have some explaining to do. So now I can kind of shoot for as long as I can stand to process pictures. Some of the pictures you don't know you're going to get till afterwards. This is kind of a slow read. If you look at I think this is a pitcher. He lost his glove to the runner. More baseball. So we get to do a series, having cameras that shoot really fast tells the story a little better sometimes with 3 pictures than, now there's a picture missing. I'm sorry. Well, great, there it is. Okay. So sometimes that second, third picture helps you with a timeline that establishes what actually happened. This is one I shot in Clovis again. So this is black and white. This is on film. I shot this from the 10-meter diving board during the Junior Olympics. And I was just looking for feature pictures. And I found this perspective, and I waited kind of a long time to get the right bubbles and waves and lines, and just something. I was looking for something graphic. More faces. Sports are great for faces. People are usually, trying really hard, very competitive, going all out. My other claim to fame with Michael Jordan is he actually bounced the ball off my head during the second game I went to. Another game, this is another picture from film. It was a softball tournament here in Visalia. And, I didn't know this was going to happen. So again, we're just shooting what I thought was going to be peak action. And then I thought, did I see what I think I saw? And at that moment, I didn't know until I got back to the lab. Nowadays, you can look at the back of your camera and go, oh, wow. More basketball. Looks kind of like track, but she's not doing hurdles, I promise. She's doing basketball. So again, I'm looking for faces. So I'm curious, do you guys see blue in the background there? Or is it black like it should be?
It's blue to me.
I don't know where that's coming from.
Yeah, there is some blue. I see black and blue.
Yeah, it looks like a ton of noise, and I don't know why it's doing that. It wasn't earlier. Shoot. Well, it's black. It's doing that in the shadows today. I don't know. Huh. Not part of the program, but that's noise from a digital camera, and you can kind of see the pattern to it. That's what happens. It's usually not present visibly. So again, I get to stand at the end zones and let the action come my way. Cameras today have really increased our ability to show faces. We used to be lucky if we could see the bridge of a nose and the the highlight in somebody's eyes with a helmet. Now, if I don't have faces under a helmet, I'm not happy. So technology has definitely allowed us to come up with better pictures that allow us to see what's going on under the helmet. The eyes make this picture, right? You might have had a little bit of light on him and when we were shooting film, but the digital camera allows us to see that so clearly. It really helps us make good pictures. And then there's halftime. And I'm sorry about all the blue and these dark spots. Hey, don't know what to do there about that, but I won't keep you with it. I've shot so many football games I couldn't begin to tell you. And you might think it would become kind of mundane. It really doesn't. These kids are working hard. They find creative ways to do things a little differently. Even standing in some of the similar places from one game to the next, things are just different. It's a lot like life that way. I always see something different. This is a charity game for put on by the sheriff's department here, and they're just having fun, really. So I get to see some of these guys that are typically wearing a badge, having a little bit of fun. It's good for us to be out at these things so that we all see each other in a more friendly sense once in a while. A lot of times when I see these guys with badges, things aren't going so well and it's very stressful. So these are good things for all of us to kind of connect a little bit. And they were all happy about this picture. I was afraid what might happen to me if I published it, but they thought it was fun. So here's kind of how I go through a typical assignment. This is a girls' golf seminar in Tulare. So I try to provide a variety of pictures for the desk to put into a story. This used to be a little more critical when we were doing page designs that were custom. They would want different pictures, different shapes that would face different ways so they could put text and headlines in certain ways and make the page look nice. A lot of our printed pages are fairly simplified templates now, so this doesn't always happen, but it's a matter of habit for me to come back with as many variety different variety of pictures and shapes and stuff as I can come up with given the time that I have. So pretty short little clinic they put on at the golf course. So I just moved around, tried not to get hit by a golf ball. That's one of the sports I worry about the most. And just kind of hung around while they did their thing. Tried to isolate people and show them what's going on. And then, so those are kind of the meat and potato pictures. And once I'm comfortable with, I guess you'd say, having enough pictures to get through the story, then I start to look for a more unique or featurey sort of perspective. So this is pretty much, not quite, but almost on the ground with the camera. And then I waited and let her hit a few. It's kind of a weird place to stand. If she lets go of the club at the wrong time, I'm in trouble. And then trying to get the ball on a spot that it shows up, not in the clouds. Took me a while to get this one right. And then kind of backed off to the side again and went for something that's a really low percentage shot. I was trying to get a tee in the air after they hit, and I got one out of, I don't know, probably 50 frames I shot for that. So, but again, it's just, I try to add one more picture to the set for the story. Soccer is one of my favorite sports. It moves almost continuously. There's a lot of physical interaction between the players. It's made for some of my favorite pictures, girls and boys. That's the goalie on the bottom. This blue stuff's killing me, sorry. This is on film. The runner in the background was safe. You can tell why. The ball is over there on the left. It got knocked loose from the catcher, who has, I think, one word on her lips. Let you guess what that is. She was not happy. Swimming makes for interesting pictures. Very graphic, usually a very clean background. And for the most part, you see faces or you don't see anything at all. It's also kind of a hard sport to shoot. You don't always see their face very long. But again, I try to get to these events a little early so that I can kind of get to know, not know, but introduce myself to the timers at either end of the pools, get a sense from the coaches who's going to be in the lanes, who to watch. Swimming's kind of hard to shoot as far as keeping track of who's who. It's surprising how much they all look alike when they get wet in the water. The lanes all look the same. So it's a very tedious task trying to keep track of who's who. I think water polo is maybe my favorite sport to shoot. It's very dynamic, lots of good stuff going on. Sometimes I push my luck a little bit. We use autofocus. That came to us in the late 90s, I guess. But I was able to shoot through the net, and this is a file photo in a sense. It was used after it was shot for this gal because she was the all-league water polo player. But if you shoot enough sports and you get really familiar with your equipment, you know its limitations. I know what I can get away with autofocus and force it to focus beyond the net. And I fight frequently with things like this. But again, it's a picture that I take after I have gathered quite a few action photos that I'm really comfortable with. So this is not the first thing I would shoot. It's after I have other pictures I'm confident about. I can go get something a little more interesting. This is my favorite way to see things happening in a game. Action's cool, but this is a youth baseball, and the camaraderie between teammates is really cool. And being in the dugout with these guys is a lot of fun. They're having a grand time. They've worked hard to get there, and when things go their way, they're yelling and screaming. And when things don't go their way, they're still buddies. And this is what was going on there. The guy did not. He was having a good day, and his teammate came up to give him a hug and keep on playing. This is one of my favorite football pictures, and not because of the football action going on, but because of what I see going on in the field. I'm a kind of a stickler for paying attention to the game when I'm shooting the game. This young lady on my background missed a really good picture because she was looking at the last one she took. So I use this picture to talk to the high school kids when I speak at the high schools, just as kind of an example of this is the kind of thing you can miss. The pictures in your camera, they're there, they're going to stay there, and so I try to tell them, get the pictures you can get while you can see them. And so one of the other things I shoot is birds and wildlife. It helps to have the right equipment. It's not a blue-tipped hawk. It's just a hawk. Man. Okay. So let me move on to well, let me go back a little bit. So one of the things that I really like about this, there's like, I don't know, 4 areas that I've sort of come to appreciate for what I do here. The variety is one. I was talking about that a little earlier today. My day today. Sharing is one of them as well. I think most photojournalists have the desire to share, I guess, and so we're looking for things we can share. It's kind of a hard thing to explain, but when I get a good picture, it's like the first thing I want to do is like make sure that it runs or it's published. we get to see things that a lot of people don't get to see. So sharing them is really important. It's frustrating when we shoot things and they don't get used. That's kind of been a complaint among journalists just like to whine sometimes, but that's one thing. It's disappointing when we create something like this and then it doesn't get used. Another thing, one of the attributes of this job is the people factor. I was a pretty quiet kid, pretty shy kid growing up, and I'm still quiet in that sense, but I have lost my avoidance of engaging people. Through this job, definitely has kind of pushed me out there to engage people, and I pretty quickly learned how cool that was. I've met some amazing people. I've had some incredible conversations with people that had nothing to do with news, but it's always been stemming from news assignments. So that's at the time I walk away from this, or the time they let me go from this job, that's the thing I will probably miss the most is my interaction with so many people in the community. It's really cool. Leading from that is trust. I've been trusted with so much just because I was the guy from the newspaper. People let us into their homes, into their businesses. They share with us things that seem intimate sometimes. Not everybody does it, but it's pretty cool to be the person that they trust to relay their story. And I always say it's their story. In the newsroom, we talk about, it's Eric's story, or it's Joshua's story, or somebody like, meaning the reporter who's writing it, but really it's not. It's the subject story. And so that's one of the things that I try to keep in mind. Taking the pictures for some of the things that we have more control over this is their story. It's going to be their story, and for most people, this is a first-time experience. For us, it's old hat to take this picture over and over again. But it's wonderful to have that trust. It's sometimes kind of a burden. That's not the right word. It's serious. We take it pretty serious. And so, I've always felt that I needed to live in the community where I work. I think it kind of grounds you to what is right and wrong about what you do. I have a really good relationship with our local law enforcement folks and the fire department because I don't know, I guess because I do the right thing. But having those relationships also makes my job easier. When I show up to some of these chaotic events, fires and crime scenes and stuff, they know me. They know they know how I behave. They know what kind of pictures I publish, the kinds of pictures I don't publish. Sometimes it's a little frustrating when I come across a newer law enforcement person who's not familiar with me, and it's not their fault. I get kind of accustomed to the trust, and when it's somebody who hasn't had the ability to get to know me that well, it can be a little frustrating in a moment of urgency. So anyway, so those are things that kind of keep me plugging along. My engagement with the community has been a lot of fun, and having some feedback from people. Once in a while we get into people's homes and I'll see one of my pictures hanging on the refrigerator. It's totally my place of honor. Those are more important to me than some of the awards that we've won over the years. It's really cool to find my picture on somebody's refrigerator. That's the family place of honor in most cases. It means what I have done has struck a chord with them, and so that's kind of what we're after. So let's see here. This is from this year. Used to shoot from right about where these guys are standing. This is the team sideline, of course. So we aren't standing among the team, but we're from that elevation. For COVID, they elevated everybody up into the stands. Required a little bit of figuring out what to do. But it made it for an interesting perspective. It's a different perspective, and you adapt and you get to it. This just kind of worked out. The sideline is this 3 foot, 4 foot wide white band. It completely isolated him. So like, oh, well, that kind of it's not as bad as I was probably complaining about at the time. But COVID has definitely changed how we do things, and in some cases how we're not doing things anymore. There's another shot from same game. So I was standing up in the stands to shoot this game instead of down the sideline. It was just a very strange experience. I think for the players probably too. There's not that immediate reaction. They were they had a false audio thing playing over the PA system. It was really bizarre. I guess they were trying to accomplish the live atmosphere. Okay. So I'm going to go transition here to news. Now, do you want me to, I know you said take stuff at the end, but if you want to interject any questions about some of these categories as we go along, I'd be happy to do that too. Or do you want to just keep rolling?
It's up to you, Ron.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if you had questions. If you don't, I'll keep going. But
I have questions, but I was going to save them to the end. But
okay, that's cool. So I'm gonna get into breaking news here, maybe. So this is probably the part of the job that I think most people associate photojournalists with, is the disaster pictures and stuff. They definitely make for some dynamic pictures. The flames are awesome and stuff, but again, we're trying to get sort of the interaction between the human element. That's really what we're after most times. I'm not here to document the size of the flame or necessarily how much damage there was. It's part of it. But in terms of pictures, it's really kind of more about the human element of it. This is an extra that the newspaper put out back in '94. I think in my 30 years, the paper, we have done maybe a half a dozen extras at all. I think this was the first one that I was part of. And some of you might remember this story stemmed from a kidnapping. And they finally found this young girl out in the middle of nowhere in Tulare County. And it was a day that I was listening to the scanner, and I'm trying to think how many days had passed. Anyway, this was still kind of a fresh story. They were still actively looking for her. And I heard on the scanner on the sheriff's department about that. I can't remember the exact language anymore, but I remember hearing that they had found something, and my ears kind of perked up because we're used to listening to them all the time, and there's different tones of voice. There's just the different way they say things. I knew this was serious. And I could also tell by the number of people that were kind of headed that way that this was going to be something. I didn't really know for sure what it was, but I knew something was likely to be important. It was kind of a long way from Visalia, if it says here, so it was a commitment. And this is before we had cell phones. So I had to do my communicating over to a radio, which it's an open frequency. We were pretty sure that our competitors might be able to hear us, and we didn't want to tip them off to what we were doing. So I got out there, and unfortunately, this was where they found this girl. And so this crime scene, you can see in this picture on the left, the main picture on the left, I'm probably a dozen feet or so from the guy with the tape measure and the evidence marker. But there wasn't anybody else out there. There was a couple of these deputies and me, and they were very busy processing the scene and were not too concerned with me. I guess maybe I wasn't in their way, and I was trying not to be. So I was concerned that I didn't create footprints or anything else that was going to mess them up. So I remember asking them, where can I go? Where do you want me to not go? And those kinds of things with law enforcement really help them know that you're not just a loose cannon flying around with a camera. So I ended up with, pictures that day that really doesn't happen anymore. Now when there's a crime scene like this, they'll block off the entire county road to the next intersection while they process a scene. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a little less trust of the media today than there was at that time. There's also the fact that the immediacy of my pictures, there wasn't any. Those pictures were not going to see the light of day until the next day's paper. There was no website. There was no social media, none of that. It was all on film. It was, it was going to be a while before it hit the world, as it were. So that they knew they had some time built into, notifying other people and so forth. Yeah, today, if this happened, there's no way I would even see the deputies doing this. They'd be so far away from where the media is allowed. So things like this have changed quite a bit over the years. We still get, access. I've seen miles and miles and miles and miles of yellow tape in my life, I think now. This is in just north of downtown Visalia. And sometimes these things happen very quickly. The police department or sheriff's department, this is the police department, they get a call and somebody doesn't cooperate, for lack of a longer explanation. They won't come out of the house, or they've got somebody against their will and all those kinds of things. And they immediately start to tape off intersections and streets and stuff to keep people from wandering in and either making the situation worse or getting hurt or potentially being in the line of fire for either the suspect or the officers. So this is the process that kind of the first thing that happens. This was a gentleman north of downtown, who would not come out of the house. And so eventually a lot of officers pile up. My general routine is to try and stay perpendicular to the rifles. And the police department's pretty good about keeping us out of harm's way. But occasionally, you get into a corner situation or whatever, and they're coming at different angles, and you just do the best I can to find a big tree, find a car with a big Chevy block in it or something. I can duck behind if things go south. But generally try to not be directly behind them or obviously in front of them. Sometimes they'll give me a little tip on the sides. Hey, you might want to look over the fence. There's going to be some guys doing something soon. So I kind of look that way, and sure enough, these guys popped up. And the one on the right is covering his associate on the left, and he's firing essentially tear gas through a window. And then they were gone. So that was 2 seconds of opportunity, but I would not have probably not have had that picture if somebody in the police department hadn't trusted me with that information for a brief moment. So that kind of stuff is very helpful. This is the same scenario. This is the guy on the right is the one that would not come out of the house. He, I think, threatened officers. I never wanted to cut down a tree so much in my life, but that was the only angle I had. So he was threatening with a machete. This went on for a couple of hours, as I recall. They tried really hard to talk him out. He would not. And eventually this did not go well. I forget what prompted this, but he got aggressive and they ended up shooting the man. So the picture I didn't put in here is the one of him all bloodied up after they drug him out of the house. Sometimes we run that stuff and sometimes we don't. That's a whole nother discussion I probably don't have time for. But my job is to acquire those images as they come forward. And then we can talk about it later in the newsroom, whether or not it's appropriate for the story. Sometimes those discussions are not, don't involve me. Sometimes they do. But again, my job is to come up with the pictures, to have the picture if it's there. So it's, you can say no, but you can't say yes to a picture you don't have. So this is not the same scene, but it's a very similar scene. This is grief. Again, it's, you see this at a lot of standoff situations where the police put up a line and relatives and friends show up, and some, depending on the situation, people start to react. Again, I'm trying to remember what we do with this picture. This is probably not one that we ran as main art, but it adds to the telling of the story visually. I would not probably shoot this picture in somebody's backyard. That's kind of I don't know, there's not a really hard definition there when and when not to do this. Again, this is, kind of get into, I guess, media ethics, you could call it. But this is outdoors, broad sunlight. And this, one of the measures I guess I use is this woman went on for a really extended period of time. It wasn't just a brief moment. And I try to not just illustrate brief moments in a way that makes them look like they're enduring, so if it makes any sense. So if she had done this briefly and then been fine, I probably would not have, I might have taken the picture not knowing that, but if it didn't characterize her overall reaction, I would not have used the picture, if that makes sense. This is another shooting at Visalia Mall. Again, apologies for all the blue. Man, I gotta figure this out. This was in a parking lot. The police department, I think, if I remember right, had come across this guy, and I think he was wanted, and it turned into a shootout. And all of those holes in the bullets, or all those holes in the windows are from bullets, and there were others as well. It was quite a mess out there. So I get there, and they already have it taped off pretty quickly. So I'm looking again for that interaction. Just a picture of a car with bullet holes in it is not quite as interesting as one with the detective standing there trying to figure out what's happened. So I hang around for a while, and things evolve. They're finding and they're looking for evidence. This is on the sidewalk on Walnut Avenue. At this point, they're too busy to talk to me. So I'm, making pictures as best I can, trying to come up with different pictures, trying to find perspectives. Eventually the chief will talk to us, and I try to find a way to shoot this so that it kind of sets the scene as well, because I never know which, like maybe they only use 2 pictures. So I try to have a variety of things so that as a reader, you kind of know, you have a sense of placement. This should be a silhouette instead of a bunch of blue light, but these things tend to attract crowds, and in some cases they become entertainment for the crowd. It's kind of interesting. Don't really understand that. A lot of shootings I've shot. They don't happen every day, but they happen very unexpectedly. And getting to them is very tricky. And nowadays we have an insatiable right now kind of attitude about getting things online. That's kind of a business thing, in the sense that the sooner we have stories, especially if it's a story like this where there will be the same story in other competing media, the sooner we have it, the more people come to our story. And there's some other links to that, but it eventually ends up as an ad dollars kind of thing. So we're trying to build traffic on our website like everybody else. So the sooner we get an image up, the quicker people will find our story and stick with our website maybe. So this is not a great picture. It's not going to win me any awards, but it kind of shows people what's going on. It lets people look at it who can't stop like I can stop. And so I'm the ears and eyes of our readers in this sense. Sometimes I can't really see any better than they can, but I can stop and do it. I have lenses that reach a little farther than your eyeballs might and stuff. And then I have to work my way around the scene, because the scenes are very big these days. They tape off very large areas, and I'm trying to find, again, interaction between law enforcement and the scene. That's kind of the generic way to put it. And a lot of times it's not very exciting. And again, the chief of police, little book in the background to make it maybe a little visual interesting. So this is the crime scene tech beginning to work the scene, record visual images, so they create computer enhancement stuff. It's kind of fascinating. They basically record the whole scene and then they can move it around in 3D, and it's quite a tool they have. Occasionally, these things happen, and our print deadlines, the time at which we have to have print and stories away and ready to publish, has moved up into the afternoon. It used to be like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, depending on which page it was for. Now everything is like, I think the latest we can really go is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And depending on which page it is and which publication, because we do Tulare and Visalia, some things are nearly set in stone. So if you look at that middle right story, a suspected bank robber shot by Tulare PD, you might guess that would be like the main story on 1A. And in a perfect world, it would be. This day, it was too late to make that change. So they squeezed it into the front page, and then they ran what they could on the next, or actually inside page. So I had this great angle on a shooting, and it ran, not even quite 2 columns. So it's like, those are the frustrations we have sometimes. It's like, we got a lucky break on an angle, and because of the way the paper was put together that day and at that hour, it was kind of a done deal. So it does run on our website, so it does get to be seen. So again, I'm at a news thing. They're looking for a man who went missing in the river. A lot of these things involve multiple agencies, and they now have drones. This is pretty early in our drone world. So having a drone was news at that point. I think this might have been their first deployment of the drone in that area. And then just scene setters and stuff while they're looking, what they're looking through. This was a night the power went out downtown, and with it, the lights, and I was racking my brain, what does a photographer do when the lights go out? How do you show no light in a picture? And I got really lucky, and I saw one of my friends putting flares out at an intersection so people didn't run into each other. And it was, I mean, I think less than a minute, and the opportunity was gone, because just the flare laying there was not nearly as good a picture. Again, that human interaction I'm looking for. This is how people are dealing with the situation, kind of thing. So sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I'm sorry, these are just a tad out of order. Something got jumbled. This is back to the river search. And while I'm out at stuff like this, I'm always thinking we're a little bit ahead. We do stories on all kinds of things. Obviously, there's the social element of the homeless out living along the river. And I saw this picture, this individual's tent with the backdrop of this, ginormous, elegant home in the background. And I think we used it later for a story about the homeless, just to kind of put things in scale, I guess, to draw people's attention to what's going on out there. It's, regardless of how you feel about it, it's my job to illustrate how these things look, I guess. So this is to illustrate how my days go. I can't tell you, today was one of them, I think I was saying earlier, but this is probably the most dramatic contrast in one day and in a shortest amount of time. This is a graduation from COS, or of COS, our local junior college. So I'm in the middle of taking pictures on the field with the graduates, and I'm kind of roving around because I'm allowed to do that in a fairly respectful manner and from some distance. So this is shot with telephoto lens, I think from behind the graduates. Yeah. And about the time my cell phone rings, and it's an officer from Visalia PD that I know, and I'm thinking, he's probably got a kid in this group of grads, and he wants me to take a picture of his, his kid or whatever. So I answer the phone, and he's asking me, "You busy?" Like, well, I'm in the middle of a graduation. Yeah. And he goes, well, there's a fire down on Noble. And I'm like, well, how big a fire? He goes, trust me, you're going to want to be there pretty quick. So I'm like, okay. And I don't get these calls very often. And when they do, I especially from somebody in law enforcement, they understand the scale of these things a little better. But so I went with his advice, and I left the graduation before it was over, which is unheard of. The I could not see the smoke from where I was standing because of the nature of the topography and stuff. But this is the fire that he was talking about. So I went from, you know, happy times to not such happy times. I gotta find this other picture here really quick. Shoot. Where'd it go? So I'm gone. Oh, maybe not. Nope. Well, anyway, you get the idea for contrast. It happens kind of frequently, it seems, to go from one sort of assignment to a different type entirely. This is out of the place where they were picking fruit, and they had a chemical exposure. Oh my gosh. So again, you know, we're trying to show them what happens out here. There's some compassion for these people, and try to show them a little bit of respect. And a lot of these cases, I had the opportunity to ask folks if they were okay, and if we can do that, we do that, because this was not something that they were doing voluntarily. This is another case where that should all be black in the background. These folks lost a dear friend in an unfortunate accident. The reporter and I went and weren't even really sure we were in the right place because it happened off the road quite a ways. And eventually the mortuary showed up, and I chose not to use a flash. I relied on ambient light, and I made probably half a dozen frames of the whole thing, just because we needed some visual element, but it just felt wrong to flash that environment. And so I didn't. And a couple of them were nice enough to actually talk to us at the moment. I mean, their friend had just died, and so it was really a rough moment, and we felt a little intrusive. I think they understood, you know, why we were there, and they apparently appreciated the way we handled it. I was really happy to hear at this gentleman's service, one of them came over to me after the service and expressed his gratitude for what we did and how we did it. So that kind of helped me feel better about doing some of these things. Everybody's different. Grief is different for everybody, so you never know. But it's nice once in a while when you hear that you've tried at least, and it was appreciated. So this is another car accident. Some of these are really wild things that happen. That's the scene from that accident. That's a Lamborghini that some guy, I forget how fast he was going, but it was quite fast and hit, I think, 2 cars, maybe 3. So a lot of these I'm trying to find scenes to show show what happens. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. This happened to have an overpass nearby, and I shot from the overpass because I thought you can see the tire tracks, you can see the 2 cars, you can kind of put together what happened really quickly. The newspaper decided to run that one instead, so that's how it goes. I don't always get my way. The picture at the bottom is another incident. But just to touch on ethics a little bit, you know, with crime scenes, especially car accidents, that you may have seen this happen before, where there's an accident and some alcoholic container is found nearby. We don't always run that picture unless it is absolutely certain and verified by law enforcement that the driver was under the influence. And even then, I kind of want to be sure that it's that influence, you know, that they weren't high on something besides alcohol, so that is a fair picture. That's, I guess, what I'm getting at. I would not have done this if I weren't absolutely certain. And I grilled the officer about this before I took it. So, are you sure this is, you know? And he was absolutely certain. There were quite a few of those, and some of them were empty, and some other details. But so I was comfortable with the picture. Again, with the immediacy, we're trying to get stuff quick, and sometimes we're going to have a picture out before next of kin is notified, and so we're trying to be a little sensitive about this. There's so much social media, things tend to get out there before we do, even sometimes. But in this particular case, this was the picture that told the story a little better. But I had to wait for the officer to walk in front of the license plate, just to kind of give it a little bit of anonymity. So sometimes, without knowing it, I've covered fatalities that involve the children of friends. And it's a little easier for me when I don't know that ahead of time. But I knew something was up with this one when I really couldn't see what I was shooting at the time. It was so dark and so far away. But when I saw the Tulare County Sheriff show up, I had a feeling that it was more serious, and that it probably involved somebody from his department, at least. Turned out to be my friend's daughter. And so some of these pictures never see the light of day, just because there's a lot to this story. We kind of screwed this story up, the newspaper did. And as a result, it's caused some really hard feelings that should not have happened. We made a mistake, and there's no undoing things like that, which is unfortunate. So that's one of the reasons we have to be very, very careful. So back to this, there's several pictures here because again, I like to have a variety depending on what we find out later to know which picture is appropriate. So I'm going to skip down to a couple others here that. So sometimes the news is actually the weather. Some of you might remember this picture. I know John does, but it snowed here, and that became big news because we don't usually get snow. And that was back when we had 4 photographers, and we all scampered out. Well, 3 of us that were on duty scampered out to get pictures. So I got the opportunity to make this kind of iconic picture for Visalia. It was a lot of fun. We had crazy interest in that picture. So sometimes news is kind of fun. There's the other picture I was looking for, darn it. That's the after graduation picture. That's what I saw when I drove up to the plant. Other news, weird things happen. We're always listening to the scanner. I heard this, I couldn't quite hardly believe it. I went out there and, you know, I call this picture unplanned stop. I never really got a good answer how he got up on the sidewalk like that, but fortunately nobody was hurt. This is just a strange incident. This guy drove from, I forget if it was from Bakersfield or Merced, but he drove to Visalia with a deceased person in his car, and he drove to the hospital. Again, we didn't get a lot of information. The local PD turned it over to the PD there from where he was from, and they handled it. I don't know what became of it, but it was very, very weird thing to hear come over the scanner. So this is into my news pictures. This is a rollover traffic accident, and if you can see on your screen, if you follow that green hose down to the bottom of the tree, you see the hand. I didn't see that there for a while. If you can believe it or not, that man was fine when they got him out. Not totally fine, but you can see where that tree is, and it's kind of in his lap, along with the steering wheel and the console and all that business. It was kind of cool. I shot this picture, and then I think it was a month or so later, the fire department came to me and asked if I could lend them a series of these pictures so they could use it for training. I was like, cool, another audience for, you know, sharing, if you will. So that's kind of fun when I get to help out with that stuff. All right, I am going to move on to some other weird stuff. So blue stuff. Sometimes we get to do illustrations. This is where I get to really play to my imagination's limits. This is a lot of times it's for entertainment sort of stuff. We used to do more illustrations when there were more of us on staff. Now time's kind of tight, and they've kind of fallen out of fashion in a sense in the newspaper. But this was for a play performance, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and this is a Photoshop project where I shot the guy on the right twice in a different character and then blended them together. This blue stuff is killing me, sorry. This is another studio shot from Lemez. We had this young model that was in the play and brought a couple props, tried to make it really simple so they could put headlines or whatever else might show up. Little story about the age of space. So I brought some props from home. That's actually the television that I watched the moon landing on. That's how old I am. And again, different shapes, just so they could put it on the page differently. Black stuff. This is all black background. So it's kind of fun when I get to do these. You know, I get to play with lights. If I can find a willing subject, that stuff that's in the air is flour. This young lady told me that there was flour in her hair for days after, even after washing. So it's these things are often the compilation of cooperation with subjects. This is another thing we did for entertainment. This is something for COS, their drama department. I love working with those guys. They're always helpful. It's a great collaboration when we can make pictures like this work. Realize doing this. So all that stuff on the top should be black. This is a feature story. Again, it's kind of a portrait, so there's sort of the slide between feature stories and portraits as to what category you want to put them in. But I really wanted to isolate her, to spotlight her, if you will. And so I actually built a snoot for the flash that out of cardboard that was, I think, 4 feet long and about a foot square. And this diamond has an elevated platform behind home plate. So I had the sports reporter hold the flash and the snoot and pointed at her, and we made some test shots to make sure it was pointed in the right place, and then we let her pitch for a few frames. We did it at night, or kind of late. It was kind of a balancing act between her dad being able to see the ball coming in and having enough darkness to make it work. I'm gonna go through fire pictures really fast here. This is from the recent fires. I was a couple of times in places where I was maybe slightly concerned about my safety. Not really life-threatening, just inconvenience mostly. That's the smoke at Shaver Lake. This is the one time that really got my attention. He and I both heard the tree fall, not that tree in the picture, but heard another tree falling. That is a scary moment for anybody, even those guys who are accustomed to it. So it doesn't really matter what you're wearing as far as protective gear if one of those hits you. This is in Yosemite. It was kind of cool to see wildlife doing its own thing with so few people. That's haze is from the fire. I get a kick out of this because the guy's got a DSLR hanging on his shoulder, but the camera it's using is this iPhone. Excuse the blue. So that's a flattened cabin. I think that was from the creek fire. So I'm looking, it was such devastation. I really had a bit of a challenge sometimes finding things that had enough icon look to them so you could tell what it was. This is a flattened house, and you can't tell it could be shattered, but I thought the screen door kind of helps tell you that, that's what it was. That's metal that has melted and run down from the truck. It's the inside of a burned out car with the burned trees in the background. Those trees that are on fire are probably in the neighborhood of 100 to 150 feet tall. This was a day they were backlighting to keep the fire from getting any bigger. They would light it at this end and eliminate or reduce the fuel that it had to go forward. Miles and miles of hoses, another collapsed cabin. Finally found somebody who was at the cabin and was sort of optimistic. He was saying they had already planned to rebuild. A lot of folks have not decided yet. So a lot of pictures of damage. Trying to find different ones was very challenging. After a while, it all kind of looked the same. I'm going to stop there so that you have some time for questions. I heard you have some.
Sports photos, depth of field is kind of make or break it. How do you approach that issue?
The depth of field was the first part I heard of that, was there?
When you're taking sports photos and you want depth of field, you want the most interesting part to be in focus and visible. And is there anything that you, what lenses are you using to make that happen? What f-stops, that kind of thing?
Most of the sports that we shoot, seems like most of the sports we shoot are not in well-lit venues. Football, water polo, those are usually in the evening. So to answer the easy question, most of the time I'm using the long lens, 300 millimeter or more. For basketball, sometimes a little shorter. And most of the time I'm probably at the widest aperture of the lens. For two reasons, really. Probably the most frequent reason would be to get the fastest shutter speed that I'm able to get in the available light. So it's a tricky balance between, I'm trying to keep the ISO low so I don't have any extra noise, trying to keep my shutter speed, depending on the sport, if I can get away with a thousandth of a second, I'm happy. If it drops down to below an 800th of a second, I start to worry a little bit about motion blur. And second part of that, having the aperture wide open, is to eliminate the background stuff. The sidelines can be very, very busy. So I really don't want those to be in focus in the first place. It helps the players stand out from the background to shoot in a wider aperture. But yeah, it's kind of yin and yang there. They work together. I need more light in to achieve the higher shutter speed most of the time.
So you use a center focus a lot of times when you're shooting sports pictures?
Most of the time I'm using, my camera has multiple, it's like 50 something focus spots.
Right.
And so I'm using single spot, and I do move that a little bit depending on how much time I have to react and where things are headed. But I typically start out center. Yeah. It depends on the sport a little bit, I guess. Sometimes with water polo, I'll start a little off to one side because they're going to throw towards the goal usually. So I might be a little off center to start with. And I don't usually get a lot of time to change that when things are going. And I'm trying to think of a typical football game. I shoot probably 1,500 frames. Of those, I might be happy with. Well, okay, happy is quantitative. There might be like 100 plus viable images out of that were things aren't awfully cropped, or the autofocus decided to focus on the bench instead of the players. So those kinds of things you could toss out. I'm was that 1 in 10-ish, and then from there, there's maybe 15 to 20 images that I'm happy with as far as content, storytelling, sharpness, technical issues, and then just the overall composition of the picture. So it narrows down quick for those kinds of pictures. But digital has given us the opportunity to take more pictures without more cost. Typically when we were shooting film, I would shoot about 5 rolls of film in a football game. And it just got to be really time consuming to go beyond that, and it got expensive. So, we were a little tighter with the shutter than we are today. The cameras didn't move as fast as they do now. I think my film camera went as far as 8 frames a second. My current digital camera does 12. So, those things add up.
So do you overshoot and then crop down to frame it the way you want it?
I subscribe to our theory of shoot tight and crop tighter. Most of, almost all, let's see, probably 98% of the time I'm cropping an image to some degree. Hopefully not very much, but I try to trim out stuff on the edge that's distracting and not helpful. I really crop down to the essence of the picture as best as I can. That's one of the perks of being a photojournalist as opposed to a wedding photographer. My pictures don't have to fit an 8x10 or 5x7. They can be 8.5 by 3 3/4 or whatever it may be. I can crop that way and it'll display that way in the website. It gets a little weird when somebody orders a reprint and then I have to fudge or fix it or something. But for the most part, I can crop my pictures exactly the way I want them to be, and I don't have to make them fit into a format. Does that help answer?
Ron, do you shoot JPEG, RAW, or both?
I shoot RAW almost all the time, with few exceptions. There's a lot of debate about that. I have the luxury of being able to do that, and so I do. There is a lot more information in a RAW file than there is in a JPEG file. I have the time to download and process from RAW files, so I do. It has helped me control the highlights in some of these gymnasiums and football fields where you've got shiny white shoulder pads that just blow out. So stuff like that, and being able to bring out faces a little better. So I shoot RAW. The few times that I shoot JPEG is usually in a very, very controlled situation with studio lights. And only then if it's a mass shooting. That does not sound well. Where we're shooting a lot of things with the same background. We used to do a thing with a red carpet at the proms. We'd set up a background and we'd have a red carpet and we'd let the kids come through and have their silliness. And those were all, it's a very controlled environment. So there was no point to do RAW there. We did JPEG and it was all fine. But generally I shoot RAW because it's.
Monopod, tripod?
For sports, monopod, rarely tripod anywhere. I just feel like it reduces my mobility. Yeah, monopod for sports frequently because the lens gets real heavy real quick, but it allows me to pivot really easily. Also a safety thing. I just had this discussion online a day or so ago. Somebody's asking about wrestling and using a tripod, and it's like, no. I don't even use a monopod at wrestling because they allow me to get, within about 5 feet of the mat or the circle, and I want to be able to evacuate like immediately to mitigate, injury to myself, to the wrestlers, to the referee, or whatever. But I don't want hardware there that I can't move in a moment. I also, because I'm on the mat, I'm afraid that a tripod or even a monopod could damage the mat. So stuff like that. Generally, a monopod's most.
Ron, with the newspaper's website, now have galleries of images. Does that change? Has that changed the way you shoot, and does it draw significantly more traffic to the website?
So I can remember all those questions. It has. Yes, I think it has changed a little bit how I shoot. Again, you know, that having those galleries was really a cool thing for us to be given. It used to be that we had, you know, 2, maybe 3 color spots on a front page. That was all that all the processes that went into making a color page would allow us to do. Now I think there is a limit to the number of pictures we can put in a gallery, but we don't usually go to that limit because there's what I call a reader fatigue. You know, you get to 100 pictures and you better, the 101st better be a pretty good one, or people are just going to start to, you know, kind of glaze over. So it has allowed us a place to put pictures that weren't seen before. Now that those galleries are there, there's also that void to fill, in a sense, that I have to do that. So I do shoot some things I probably would not have shot at games prior to galleries. Was there a third question there? I forgot. Sorry, John. What was the end of that?
Has it drawn more traffic to the website?
Oh, traffic. Yes, definitely. I'm not supposed to talk about numbers, I suppose, but I can tell you that when we have galleries for football games, especially for some of the rivalry games like the Cowhide that we have here, the numbers are insane. You know, yeah, people like to see pictures. They've changed the way our website displays galleries now, so the numbers are harder for me to even look at. But I know for a fact that, you know, people go to the website and they definitely like to see the pictures. So it's the other evidence of that I have is we sell reprints, and I would venture to say 85% of the reprint orders we get are from sports and from those galleries. So I know they're getting seen.
Ron, what's the future of photojournalism? Newspapers seem to be in trouble.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I can guess that from my perspective, in a generic sense, I'm a content provider. So, you know, people who do what I do in the future may have another outlet that's not a newspaper per se. I hope that we continue to have newspapers in the sense that it provides an fairly equal, and we try anyway, coverage of the community, the activities that go on, you know, balanced for all the schools. They don't always think that, but it's true because they're all mad at us, so that means we're not favoring any of them really. But the you know, I think my job at the newspaper is probably on the edge of not being a job anymore, in the sense that, you know, when I was hired, that was what we did. I was a photographer. There wasn't anything else I was, you know, held accountable for. Today's hires, they don't typically hire a photographer. They're looking for somebody who can write and take pictures, and in that order and in that priority, I would say most of the time. So that's the business of newspapers. But I still think there are places in our society, in our world, in our economy, whatever you want to call it, for photographers. One of the things that I saw happening as photo staffs and news staffs in general began to have some reductions was places that had kind of depended on news coverage. Some of them would hire these folks under their own wing to provide that content to multiple outlets. So the outlet wasn't hiring somebody to go to those different things. Those different things then started to hire their own producers of content. So I think the content provider, in a sense, as I said, I think that will continue to exist. My particular job, I don't know that it will, just because the business is changing so much.
Thank you for that, Ron. Are there any other questions? Some of you haven't had questions, and we're starting to run out of time here.
Okay, I did have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Do you typically work in conjunction with a reporter on the scene, or do you just go out and take the pictures and then come in and give them to the reporter who then writes the story?
A little of both. We are all what I would call self-initiating. So, like in the case of sports, there's a sports reporter there all of the time. Occasionally, we have to go in different directions to cover our bases, but I don't write sports. For a feature story, or a back to school story, that kind of thing, we're a little spread out. I may go to one school, the reporter may go to a different school. So we're kind of covering two schools. So we've got pictures from one and a story that's kind of maybe based on the other. At other times, like, some of these news scenes, obviously, we'd like to have two people there. Sometimes one of us will get there a lot sooner than the other, or maybe somebody else can't go because it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and then we play catch up later. So it's almost always a team effort in some fashion or other. It's helpful to have a second person at an event like a news scene, just to kind of keep up with what's going on and have your head on I can't talk today. What's the so you can know what's going on, and that became really paramount recently when we kind of thought that there was going to be some violent activity at the California Capitol. It didn't manifest like we thought it might, which is good. But our company actually mandated that anybody who went to that event went in pairs, and you were not to separate from each other. So it's, sometimes we don't get to do it, but other times it's absolutely required. So it's all of the above, I guess.
Thank you.
Well, Juan, I really appreciate your filling us in on what a photojournalist does and how you do it. It's been very interesting. And I'm sure all the members of the club that have tuned into this are quite enthralled with what you're doing and how you're doing it. You've been very helpful on pointing out and shooting different kinds of things that some of us can take when we shoot our kids or grandkids at a event. And thank you. I want to thank you for a job well done.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to speak. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I enjoyed your perspective on things. So, yes, it's helpful.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to say good night.
Good night.
All right.
Till next time.
Thanks, everybody.